Hello, and welcome to the Storied Arcs Tankobon crossover coverage of Pluto. And today we are covering volumes 5 and 6, and I'm your co-host, Mike.
Your co-host, Alex.
And I'm Cole Greco from the Tankobon Podcast.
So, there is a lot of stuff to cover here. I'm glad we're not doing, like, the beat-for-beat story recap, because I think that would be 90 minutes by itself.
That'd be a lot.
It's just a lot of ground covered.
Yeah.
I think...
As someone who does podcasts covering beat-to-beat story moments from many manga, this one would be, I think it would make it a slog if that's the way you did it. Sort of how, Death Note turned out that way a little bit too, where it's like, okay, this is a lot of stuff happening.
And I think that's more so in terms of Pluto. I think that really ramps up with these volumes here, these chapters. What are we looking at again? Chapters 32 to 47 here. I think it really, really ramps up. I think you start seeing some of they start tying, I don't want to say loose ends, but you start seeing how things are folding in on each other, how all this history, be it history back for the Central Asian War or Gazit's specific history, these gaps in his memory which he's interpreting as dreams and things, all these bits that they've been sprinkling in the first 4 volumes. He really starts to bring them together, and they start tying in, they start filling out so much more backstory, so much more character. You start seeing what these connections are between all of these disparate characters that we've been introduced to, that were all these kind of different points, different facets of the, I guess, like the beginning of robotics and AI in this world. You get a sense that it was kind of building to this, to get these reveals, to lay this on the audience, to the reader, so that you can naturally, as one does, just go ahead and kill off your main character. We're going to build up all this up here, and so we can take Gazit off the board, because obviously we ended the previous volume, the previous discussion here with taking Adam off the board, and so there's just I'm trying to articulate here. A lot of this, I think, of our discussion is maybe what are some of the differences or similarities between like Western and Eastern sequential art storytelling here. And I think one thing that we talked about, maybe going back at the very first discussion we had, was how Pluto and Urasawa, in specifics, this has a lot of it doesn't have a lot of the standard manga tropes that I think people think about when they go in terms of storytelling, in terms of presentation, things like that. And the more I read of it, I think that there are parts of it. I think when we had that interlude with Hercules going back to his wrestling days, and you see a lot of the action there, the way that's presented, I think that feels very stereotypically manga to me, just from what I had seen and what I'd been exposed to. But in terms of the storytelling and the way that he is kind of doling out these details, the way he is layering this overall mystery, because it starts off as this kind of detective murder mystery, and it's slowly widening its scope into this much larger, I don't want to say conspiracy, but kind of this much larger game, and watching him kind of lay the groundwork for that, and then expand on it as the story goes on, and to pull the reader further and further in, to get more and more connected with it. I got to say, I can understand why this book has been lauded. I can understand why someone like an artist like Jacob Phillips, who works in Western comics, can look at this and see this is great. This is great storytelling. This is great detective noir, whodunit storytelling, because the pacing, the delivery, the character work, I think that's the kind of thing that when it's done at a level like this, when it's done at a high level, it translates, whether you read manga or you read Western comics or anything like that. This type of work in sequential art storytelling, I think, really does translate across, because it doesn't matter for me, someone who hasn't read this style of storytelling, like I'm in it. I'm in the story. We were talking before the recording. As we've gone on so far, I'm only reading as far as our discussions have gone. But I got to the end of this section and really wanted to keep going because I was drawn in. I was invested in what the story had done and what it had set up for me. And I had to really stop myself so I could keep myself fresh for our discussions. But I really wanted to go. That pull was strong. And when I get that in any sort of story, and especially in reading comics, I mean, I know Mike can vouch for this. I'm a fast reader when it comes to comics. Like if I get into a story and it's whatever, 12, 16, 24 issues, if I've got it all in front of me, like the odds of me stopping are pretty low. Like I'm just going to read all the way through. Like Mike
usually what happens is I say, I picked up volume 1 of this book because it looks interesting. Yeah. And the next time we talk, Alex is like, I read all 10 volumes. It's great. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, well, I owned the first one and I haven't read it. Same status as last time. Yeah.
So if you give me something and I get into it and I think it's good, I'm going to keep going. And I feel that with Pluto. I really do. Because I really appreciate how Urasawa has slowly expanded the world out. You see,
if you dropped all these characters at once, that would be. I mean, that's the kind of trope that I hate in like bad fantasy, when it's just like here's 200 pages of exposition at the beginning of the book, just telling you here's a list of all the. I'm like, I'm not trying to read a glossary. Like, tell me a story.
Well, that's a thing that happens pretty commonly in like the manga we cover on our show, because it is, it's weekly Shonen Jump. They have to, they do it week by week.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's one of those deals too, where like, if a manga isn't really succeeding after 5 to 8 chapters, they're gonna cut it. And it's gonna get like 18 chapters. It's gonna be done. So there is a little bit of pressure that like you got to show all the cool stuff, pretty early to keep people invested, right? Like you need to have your 5 or 6 characters that people latch onto. You can't just like rock with this one guy for that long, because people are gonna get bored pretty quick. But I think Pluto had the luxury of, Urasawa at this point was already pretty established and kind of a legend, and
and it's existing IP. Yeah,
exactly. He's comboing with the Astro Boy thing, so he was able to. I suspect, they were like, okay, we're gonna give you an 8-volume run, do what you want, and he probably had, I assume, almost all of the story pretty crafted out, because you can tell just like. The difference with, like I said, too, a lot of the stuff that we cover on our show is that it's very like, well, we don't know what we're going to get to cover. So we'll sort of have to just like see what's going on. It's going to be a game time decision what we do this week. Whereas Pluto feels...
How much you can get in now, knowing that there could be an...
Pluto feels like a crafted story that they then went back and kind of, it was fully drafted before they actually made it.
It feels that way to me, and whether we're talking about a total number of 65 chapters, 8 volumes, or we're talking about a 12-issue maxi series here in Western comics, that you can tell when a story is it's being written as you go. Like you have an idea of what the ending is, but like anytime you think about television that way, right? When you're writing seasons and seasons of television, and sometimes you're like, well, that episode was just they needed something that week, and they were they always talk about that's like the filler episode, or it's like we're just moving the pieces around the board. We haven't done anything, but we got to have that setup episode because we needed one more to fill. And this story does feel a little more detailed, a little more meticulous. And and Michael, I think what you said was kind of what I was getting at, the idea of so many stories that are like this, or not so much like this, but any sort of story that is wide ranging sometimes has the approach of in the first couple of volumes here, first couple of chapters, we're going to show you a little bit of all 50 characters and then slowly bring them all together. And then you'll see how clever we are, that all of these disparate stories were all really one story. But what Urasawa did here was he started small. Like we're starting about one detective following a murder investigation. And then that slowly winds its way out. And it starts with that little sojourn, I think, with North number 2, right? All of a sudden, here's 3 chapters. that is at the time like just not connected. We're just jumping over here, and then we see, okay, well, he's another one of these 7 highly advanced robots, and we jump into that, and we see how that works in the story. And so the next time we do that, we're used to it, and it just all it does is widen the world. And then we meet Adam, we meet all the creative, we start building it out, and so the world just gets bigger, but nothing feels like it was dropped in accidentally. It's like this is a time to, as soon as you feel like you've got a handle on maybe the scope of what the story is, he pans out.
There's nothing worse to me than when you feel a writer losing focus, and you feel like, hey, what happened to those characters over there? And it turns out like, online commenters didn't like it, or so they're kind of pivoting away, or they're like, I didn't really know where that was going. Now I'm interested in something else. Yeah. Whereas here you feel the masterstroke of intentionality. The other masterstroke that I want to talk about here, since we're doing basically a Gazik obituary episode, too soon. I love that he's one of the world's greatest AI, developed to be a detective. We go along with him for his detective things. And I love that the book is dialogue only. There are no narration boxes. So no one is explaining to us all the little epiphanies in his head. Yeah. Like you get to feel smart as a reader because you're tracking the significance of little clues when he learns them. Like, and it's expressed through the art. You'll see his reaction like, oh, I've heard that name before. Or, oh, that flower's name is Pluto. How about that? Little things like that. But there's then like what would make it a much lesser book, in my opinion, is if the next page it recapped for you all the details that you just took in and explained the connection to previous details from the investigation. And it's like, or if he was even worse, if Gazik was narrating that stuff, it's like, for the world's smartest bot, this guy's moving at a really slow speed. Like I want him to be ahead of me, and I want to feel like I'm catching up to a really good AI detective.
It's like Blade Runner with or without the voiceover.
Oh yeah.
Are you watching Harrison Ford just be in the in the movie and in the scene, or do you have to be told what's going on, what's in his head, what he's thinking? But yeah, no, I think oftentimes I'm not against narration boxes. I'm not against getting into the character's head. That's part of the joy of or one of the unique aspects of whether it's comics or prose writing, anything like that, where you can stop the action and just get real deep, and a character can think and get in their head and think, and you get more about that. So yeah, I'm not against that, but it can be used poorly, and I think this is a case where it would be. I think I don't know if that's something that Urasawa does in general or uses in other works, but the way it's presented here is, yeah, I think part of the idea is that Gazik is the stoic emotionalist detective, whether he's a robot or not. He's supposed to be the detached, cold, little cynical, little over it, worn out detective, and you're just supposed to see that on his face. You're supposed to track what's going on based on what you can see his expressions are, how he's treating other people. I think one thing we see here, and I think it's intentional, is in this volume now we're seeing more emotional outbursts because he is remembering more, but also it's showing that there's a progression in his character. The first couple of volumes, he is completely detached, completely emotion free. He is the most robotic, I guess is a way to put it. Right. He's just observational. And as these memories are start coming back, as he's filling in the gaps in his own history that he realized were taken from him, we see him lashing out more. We see him yelling and people being like, whoa, like, where is this coming from? And obviously this is something that Urasawa has been building towards, but you see that and it doesn't feel out of place because we've seen everything that's all the steps that have been leading up to it previous. And we've seen how it's been weighing on him, on Gazik. We see the I guess like the burden he has as all this is coming to him as he's dealing with all of it. So none of it feels out of place. None of it feels out of character. And yeah, it would be cheapened if we, in this specific case, we started getting his inner monologue of like how angry he was, of how frustrated he was, instead of just getting a couple panels, of like his burrow shroud, which is
sometimes
all you need.
Yeah. I mean, he's the character that drew me in, and I did have a little moment at the end of this of like, well, that was kind of my anchor. I was pretty invested in Kazik, like, who am I supposed to follow now? And, and at this point in reading, I knew there was an Astro Boy story, but Adam's already dead. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, well, Dr. Tenma is going to resurrect somebody into, and doesn't know what's at the other end of that. Like, right. It's like, I'm going to work on this. Every time I've tried this, I'm essentially shoving the chaos of 6 billion personalities on Earth into one AI and being like, here, sort it out.
Well, and the sample size of one, the one time he tried this.
Right. The one time he tried it. Well, yeah. The one time he's telling us, I'm like, a guy like this. Yeah. He seems like he has a lot of hobbies and side projects. And this might not even be the most nefarious or reckless thing he's ever tried. But it kept throwing me for loops here because the first time I read this, I was still very hung up on like, who is Pluto? Who's the single one bad actor murderer? And that's what we're here to solve. And this time rereading it, I'm like, I'm not even wondering about that at all because there are so many different characters and positions. There aren't two sides. There are like 20 sides.
Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, you can almost forget about Pluto. And then, like the crux of the story is like, what's like wrong with Gazit? Like he's had this kind of hacking thing done to him, right? And like his memory's fuzzy. It's like you can almost completely like not even think about like the core conflict of the story. Yeah. There's still so much other stuff going on here, right? Like he gets so mad in chapter like 35 and kills what's his name, Adolf's brother.
Yeah,
at that point too. Like there's all of these other little issues that come across where you almost forget that you're even dealing with Pluto.
Yeah. You and when they start filling in the backstory and the inferences I think we're supposed to make, which are that Gazit and Helena had a child. They had a robot child, and that child was the victim of Adolf's brother's, whatever his nefarious serial killing of, I guess, taking robot brains or whatever it was. Like, I think that it's a clear assumption that was the pain. And in that moment, that's why he just chose to kill him. But you're right though, Cole. I think you start, I get into that there. And then at the end there, kind of towards the end there, when he's facing Pluto, he's down at that generator and he's talking to his superiors and he's basically just like, yeah, can I resign right now? I'm like, no, you can't. It's like, well, then can I take like a year vacation? Right. So it's like, I'm done. Like he finally saw he saw the whole board there. He understood for the first time what was going on with that Pluto itself isn't the issue. It's Abra. It's the person behind it. And him now understanding what these dreams were, what was taken from him, that he was just like, yeah, I'm done. And I, as a reader, are like, yeah, I want to follow that now. I want to follow him on his journey. And oh, right, that there's still Pluto. He's got Dr. Hoffman over there and back in Germany. There's other things going on there. It's like, yeah, whatever. I want to see Gazit deal with what he has to deal with right here. And of course we get that a little bit up until the point when he's killed. But then now it's like, well, we have that last chapter in this volume, 37, is kind of a coda to the story there, where now we're following his wife. We're seeing the people that are left behind and how it's affecting them. Kind of the same way we saw how on a larger scale, the world was dealing with the fallout of Adam's death, and that's another story I think we can follow with Dr. Tenma and creating Adam. Again, the idea that this is a replacement for his actual son that died, which, that is the Astro Boy story there. But that idea of his loss and what he tried to do with Adam and what he tried to do to resurrect him, all those things, I'm not saying are more interesting to me than like this big bad of Pluto, but there are other avenues where I'm drawn in on that. And that's like that was like what, 1 or 2 chapters here when we're dealing with Adam. And
barely, it was
anything.
like it was stitched into one or two chapters, but there was not like a whole chapter about it.
Yeah. And yet that, to me as a reader, again, I find that incredibly compelling as well. It's another avenue to go down that is only tangentially related. He's only dead because he fought Pluto, but like, I'm not sitting there thinking about, well, where's Pluto going to go next? Who else is in danger? What's the bigger plan? It's not that isn't important. It's just that he's put so much work into these characters and the way that he's revealed their backstory to the reader. I'm all in, and I want to follow those. I'm probably more invested in that than I am in the like big parlor room reveal for Abra to be like, this was the master plan. This is what it was all about.
And like, what you're talking about is what makes it more rereadable, in my opinion. Because if it was just about who's the killer? We found the killer.
What's his
need
reasoning?
to read that ever again.
Yeah. Sure.
But and to me, I like both of those things, but I keep liking all of the discussion about, what makes AI different than humanity. Where's the line? And I think that's the really evergreen, becoming more and more relevant 20 years after the book is written. And, because right now we're having, all the lawsuits about, they're like, these bots, they just scrape famous authors and then just kind of mix a bunch of authors together and then make a new thing. And I'm like, that is crudely what humans do as well. Like, we have our influences and, we kind of riff on them. And so then you're just talking about a scale of degree in terms of what the difference is between AI creativity and human creativity. By the way, I'm all for human writers' rights. I'm not taking a stance on that. I'm just saying the discussion's happening now. And in the book, the distinction seems to be, can they feel hatred? Can they feel empathy? And there's this, what's his name? Brow 1859, something.
Yeah.
We all know who he is.
Yeah.
When he's taunting Gazik, I think in chapter 32, he said, "How does it feel? How does it feel to have killed a human?" And you see Gazik is just pissed. So he's asking him how it feels, and he's eliciting an emotion out of from one AI to another. And Brow's move is emotionally driven as well. Like, he's enjoying the sadistic pleasure of drawing emotion out of an AI. So it's like, well, these are both very real emotions. And the book, it just happened to be this way. But that's the first chapter in our discussion today. And the last chapter is his wife crying tears and, being told, like, if you do this until it's real, basically, and you will have real tears, which is what Adam was saying about food and tea and everything else. Also, I'm still totally mystified by the teddy bear, but getting more and more horrified by my daughter's Build-A-Bear.
I do want to come back to the teddy bear sitting on the chair in the dark room, which is a fantastically creepy visual. Especially because every time they cut back to him, like, we've only had the one scene where it appears he's talking to anybody. And every time we cut to him now, he's just talking into the void. We don't know, but it's fantastic.
It's zooming in closer and closer on his face, which is not capable of expression.
It's so good. But what I did want to go to is what you were talking about, the idea of feeling emotion. And it's clear that at least I get the sense that Urasawa is trying to what he's trying to say, that kind of his delineation point maybe between AI and humanity, between robotics and people, is this idea of feeling emotion and genuine emotion. It's one thing to be able to do, act, and look like humans, but it's the ability to feel that does or doesn't set them apart. And the thing that I didn't bump on it, but the thing I find interesting is that I guess it started with Dr. Tenma talking about how when he made that perfect AI, right, and he put in it 6 billion people, basically put in the entire world, and the whole idea was you put in every person in existence and let the AI figure out what the best route is, and the end result was, well, that put it into an infinite loop of never ending figuring out how to parse through all this. And the solution apparently to wake it up had to give it what they said, like extreme polarities, right? Extreme emotions. And every time they said that, whether it was Ten or anyone else, when anyone ever said extreme emotions, they all said anger and hatred, you know, as if that's the only extreme, you know, like which maybe is a commentary about humanity that down at our core and at our base, maybe it goes in that direction. But like the obvious question is like, well, like love and empathy.
Right. What's the other side of that?
It's the other, like,
right.
Well, when you say polarities of like that's the other end, that's the other pole there, but no one seems to bring that up. I think it's Gazit also when
but I think
about,
I think it's setting it up for a great reveal.
Well, yeah, and I
hopefully.
think again, I read that as intentionality of be like that the idea, you know. Again, I haven't read the end here, but like I think I've read enough stories. My prediction would be like, well, this is what he did with that first AI, which became Pluto. He gave him hatred and anger, and that woke him up. He was fine for a while there, but he resorted back to that, and that's what Abra is using. Well, then he says he did the same thing now to try to resurrect Adam, but Adam won't wake up. How do you wake him up? Ten was like, well, this is what I did the last time. We gave him all these extreme emotions there, but that turned out terribly. Someone's going to walk in and be like, well, what about emotions on the other end? What about the quote unquote
or Adam's going to figure it out? Yeah.
And that'll wake him up. And that's, you know, even though whether or not that actually happens, and I don't want either one of you to tell me that, as someone who's read a lot of stories and seen things like this, that makes sense. That's where it's going to go for me. And if that's how it goes, the quote unquote obvious route to me, I'm not going to feel cheapened by that, you know, but that doesn't mean I can't still see kind of the strings now. You know, the fact that they've said it multiple times that the only extreme emotions are the bad ones, the anger ones, the ones that lead to bad things. That they're setting themselves up. He's setting up the reader to then be like, but what about the other way? You know, and if that's how it goes, I'm not going to feel cheated by that. I think that makes a lot of sense. But I said I can still see some of the seams of the storytelling. Doesn't take anything away from me though. But that's the sense I have of where the story is going.
That was one of the notes that I kind of had here was, you know, I wonder if kind of these 7 greatest robots all had to have some sort of emotion injected, right? Like Gazit, sure, they talk a few volumes back about like his hatred. So like maybe Gazit, he was given hate, you know, he was injected hatred, or like, you know, you're talking about like positive emotions, like, you know, Uran is obviously like very empathy, maybe she gets empathy, or even like Adam, maybe he was injected with like, you know, whatever similar thing, right?
Yeah,
I like the idea that they're basically the 7 dwarfs. Which one's the sleepy one?
That could we talk about was it Hercules? We saw his kind of end here. He's talking about like I'm a fighter, like, and that's clearly what he believes he is programmed to do. You know, Epsilon is the conscientious objector, I guess, of the of the group here. Yeah. So so maybe you're right. 7 dwarves is very funny. I wonder if that's intentional or not. But the idea that maybe each one of them is an archetype, I guess that makes Gazit grumpy then, right? He's just the dour one.
I mean, he's kind of your house MD guy, right? He's like he's doing good things. Yeah. He's just not that pleasant to be around and interact with.
Doesn't have the
deeply relate to. But I think what's interesting is that final conversation between Haas, the subtly named Adolf, and Gazit is after Gazit. You know, he says, my brother was kind of the worst kind of trash, and I tried to kill you, but you still shielded me with your body. And Gazit says, it's my duty. And you see Adolf in tears, just saying Gazit with trailing periods. And then Gazit says, there's one thing I wanted to ask you, Mr. Haas. Does the hatred you feel ever disappear? And the question is sort of answered right there, because you see him weeping over Gazik's body. And it is like, oh, his human hatred is melting. But what we've learned about robots is their perfect memories never go away, meaning once they experience a certain level of hate, that doesn't go away because it doesn't fade with memories. And I
that's
think
what Brow was saying.
Realizes, and Gazit realizes at the end, like, I need to resign or die, because now that I've done this, right, I can't change. Right. Now that I know I've killed a person, there's no putting the cork back in the bottle. There's no undoing that. They've tried. and my memories came back because I'm a robot, and that's what my memories are. They're not like human memories that can be, fade and be overwritten and recontextualized. They're objective data points. And once I've done something, I just thought that was a really great exchange, because the guy Adolf, where I was like, why are we getting so much story from this guy in the last 2 volumes, actually gets like a little mini redemptive arc, even though he's a piece of garbage. He doesn't do anything to be admirable other than not really trying to kill Gazit. He was instructed to do that. He fought against it. He didn't really want to have to kill his protector, probably partially selfishly. But then when he sees Gazit sacrifice himself, that does seem to change him. And then we never see him again. So we just kind of have to assume like he's on a new path now.
Yeah, I think I think there is, he gets that one moment in the car where he's basically like, just save my wife and kid, like save them.
Right.
And of course the end result, what was that? Gazit puts him in the ejector seat out by himself, and then Gazit goes and that's fantastic there. But yeah, you're right in that he doesn't really earn any sort of redemption there. There aren't a whole lot of acts there, but I think this goes into maybe some of the commentary that Urasawa is putting into the book, because that's just Gazit asking the question, like, right.
He says, does the hate you feel ever go away?
Yeah, basically, can you change? Can people change? Can someone who was brought up in a certain ideology, a certain belief system, can people change? Which is a question that we ask now, with other people. Can people change? It just happens to be a robot asking this guy. That sparks a larger conversation about the world we have. And I think I'm generally a cynic in this way. Even though I know people, I have met them who, when I've talked to them, they'd be like, yeah, growing up, I grew up in an area where these words were said, these things were done, this is how it was. And then I moved out of that, the wider world, and looked back and be like, oh, wow, all that was wrong. So I know people who have admitted to me and talked to openly about, yeah, I grew up a certain way and I'm not that way anymore. And I believe them and I know them. But at the same time, I'm a person who generally looks at the world overall, look at people as a mass and be like, nah, we can't change. I'm a cynic in that way, just from my own personal experience living in this world. And yet I know individuals who have. So it's a little oxymoronic there. But I think that's a deeper question, a larger question about humanity that Gazit is asking, that I think we even see Adolf there struggle with, right. That he is looking at this robot who did everything that he asked in that moment, did everything he asked for him, saved his wife, saved his child, sacrificed himself for him. This person that, a couple days ago, weeks ago, hated him and did it because that was what his duty was. That's what he was supposed to do. And I think we see some conflict there of like, maybe I got it wrong. And I don't even know if Adolf knows in that moment if they can change, or if he is changed. I think all he knows is that he's grateful to this robot, and maybe that's all it takes. Maybe that's what it needs is that first step. But yeah, there's a deeper question of humanity there of can people change? Can they fundamentally change who they are if all they know is one thing?
So Cole, my question about this is, was that theme present in the original Astro Boy material? This seems like Urasawa's discovery of like, oh, look what we can do with like these same characters, the same universe. I can tell a human versus AI story that explores the depths of humanity. Like the old Golden Age manga didn't really strike me as that kind of story.
No, the original like Astro Boy one, it's more kind of the deeper, I guess, narrative there is more of like the like robot, like what rights do they have and that sort of thing. It's more of a like how human are they, that what's the kind of difference between robot human there, less so what you guys were talking about. Like it's more macro, and that follows through at least the 3 volumes I've read of Astro Boy. That is very much like the main like drive is like the what rights do robots have, what are their laws, what are their rules. There are factions that are trying to like cut down on those, and factions that are fighting for them, that sort of thing. It's a lot more based around that kind of central like conflict.
And that would have been, I was gonna say, but that would have been more in line with the era and the times, though. We're talking about the early '60s, right? That's when they were written. Yep. And again, I'm thinking about the stories of the iRobot stories from Isaac Asimov. That idea of what technology was different back then. It was the idea of simply, if we saw a cyborg or whatever, or an android, is it human? Is it not? Now I think the progression we see in Urasawa's story is far greater because we have a greater relationship to technology now. And so the spin on it now is, and there's some of that early on, the idea of robot rights and treated as humans. But because we have more experience, because we have advanced so much further in technology, it feels to me like it's a natural evolution to continue to look at AI stories and AI beings on a deeper sense, in this real core sense of what is human, not just are they human, like what makes you, what's the essence of that.
Because then once you have that definition, you start comparing and contrasting the worst humans versus the best robots and say, is it possible the best AI bots among us might actually be more human? For example, like humanity better.
More human in square quotes, because they're not terrible beings. They're additive to society, not subtractive there. It's also a way now, I think, in terms of our storytelling as we've gotten further along with these type of stories. Again, all of these are just metaphors for real life here. And so again, when Gazit is asking, when a robot is asking a human, does the hate ever go away? It's a way to spin that versus just having two people talk about it. It's another way in that can allow for that kind of conversation that maybe people maybe were or were not thinking about 60 some odd years ago. Again, because our relationship to technology is so much different now, that you can have these, I guess, like inherently deeper conversations, maybe just because we have more experience with it. You can go down these roads because our understanding and our shared language around technology, and especially now with something like AI. I think specifically a story like this, 20 years, this is still a contemporary story, but we're still 20 years away from it. So, look at we'll be with AI in 20 years from now.
Right. I mean, but in terms of like how far forward storytellers can project, when this was written, computers barely fit in a very large room.
Yeah.
And so the idea that computers would, be compact and small,
brain size. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and that, we basically used an abacus to get to the moon. If you look at like how advanced the computers were.
Slide rules, baby. Slide rules.
So I know, but it's like, that was a great act of imagination that caught people's attention and made them wonder what could be, 50, 60 years ago, which is an incredible achievement. But we no longer wonder, like now, I remember a Mike Birbiglia joke that he said how every time that someone mentions a new technology, you just have to go along with it because like you never know what's real. And so somebody could be like, hey man, have you seen the new Sony teleporter? And you have to be like, no, but I heard about it. And he's like, when I say that, he's like, but I heard about it means I haven't, but I like you. Yeah. That is how it feels like. It's like no new technology will like shock us into being like, I can't believe that fits inside of that, and that can respond now. Now we're asking very different questions. Like the technology's evolved so far that we're like, wait, is it better than us? Like, well, and that was really the point of the Matrix movie was like, are they running a better world than we did? And what makes us different? And they had good points to make, but it ultimately ended with Neo saying, because I choose to. And it was like, oh yeah, you have free will, and that makes you better than a computer.
It's the idea of free will.
What have you done with your free will?
Well, I remember a while back they were talking like maybe it was like directors or writers for like James Bond were saying that like it's pretty tough to make new James Bond movies because like his gadgets aren't that cool anymore. Like, being
I
able
love
to
that they
like
just scrapped the gadgets.
yeah, like being able to talk to someone in your watch is like,
Yeah.
you can buy one of those for like $75, right?
Yeah.
Like this,
And I think that there's something to the effect of like, what is this? I'm holding up a phone right now, but like 6 years ago, what was this? It was a tricorder on Star Trek,
Right.
And the idea that, you read Astro Boy back in the day, or you read I, Robot, or you watch the movie Metropolis or whatever, and you're like, wow, look at that. That's like that's a human shaped robot there. That's crazy. And then like, we can do that now. And so, and what was the line from the first Thor movie? The science fiction is a precursor to science fact. The idea was so some of the idea of like, at some point, someone imagined this, and maybe someone then read that later and turned that thing into reality. Like there are people out there trying to make the Iron Man suit. There are people who are trying to make lightsabers and who have made lightsabers.
Doing pretty impressive stuff with the Iron Man suit, by the way. And that's an Arthur C. Clarke quote, by the way.
Oh, thank you. That's right.
In
the movie, yeah. But the idea that you could see this and it'd be so fantastical in the '60s, and then now we have the capability to do something like that. And so, what's the next step? Well, now we can build robots. We can build machines that look and act, quote unquote, and function like humans. What's the next step? And that next step in this case for the story, and we're still dealing with, is the AI, is the processing of not just the things they can do, not just what they look like and what, it sounds terrible, but like what they can be used for. But
right.
Can they think and feel? And is that, that's like what Ex Machina is about, the movie, the idea of how it's the Turing test, right? Is how can you tell is if this thing that you created, is it programming or is it genuine inspiration? And that's I don't know if it's a question we'll ever answer, but it's something that Urasawa is dealing with now.
Yeah.
Well, I said he's dealing.
I'll let the AI answer that. I ask it all the time. I'm like, are you really thinking?
Let's see what ChatGPT says about that.
Yeah.
But it's
also,
a question that we've been dealing with.
The other comp is
Pluto, and we're still dealing with
Her.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. Exactly. Yeah.
The Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anything that has that level of like what actually is and what is programming and what is genuine inspiration. And we've been dealing it for a while now, because again, it's an issue in Pluto, and it does go back to the Matrix movies. The first one was 1999. That idea of is that AI collective, what are they actually doing? Is it just following programming? So much of what Gazit says over and over again is basically, I'm doing my duty. He's doing his job. Right. He's told to do something. He does it. He doesn't have to like it. He doesn't have to think or feel about it. He's just doing his job. He's doing his duty up until he's standing beneath that generator. He's looking at Pluto and he has all this information and he makes a choice. And what is that choice? Is it just a rejection of his programming, or is he deciding, no, this isn't good for me? I want this. No one told me, no one programmed me, no one directed me. I don't want to do this anymore. I want to change. I want to be something different. Is that the mark of humanity? Is that what being human is about? That idea of free will? Is he actually making a choice, or is that just, again, some subroutine in his consciousness? That's the larger kind of metaphysical question that I think Urasawa is throwing out there to the audience. Then again, I don't think it's necessary to pick up on or discuss when you talk about the story, because the story is still just as interesting.
No, if somebody just goes through this because they are interested in the murder mystery, I think you're going to have a fine time.
The history of humanity and robots and the war and how they all that.
Right.
There's all that there.
I think that's fun to nerd out on. And by the way, one more log on the fire there. I loved the Gazik cafe scene with Abdullah, where he's asking questions and everyone playing dumb about who Goji is like maddening, and it's driving Gazik crazy. And then as he's walking away, he's like, by the way, Gazik saying this, he's like, by the way, my system registered you as a human just now because robots don't tell lies. And I definitely know you're lying about one of the answers. And I'm not even sure we know which answer he gave that was a lie. Presumably, whether he knows who Goji is or not.
No, I think it was when he held the image up of the man in the flower field.
Oh yes, he doesn't know who the man in the flower.
Yeah, and he was like, and he said no,
right.
Which that was clearly a lie there.
Right, and then the little bot with the flowers is like, oh, that picture of Sahad you had. It's like, well, that was easy.
Clearly everybody knows who this guy is now. Yeah, because he goes on his investigation and everyone knows it. Yeah, but again, that idea of but there's also deeper commentary there, like what makes you human. Or what marks you as human, the ability to lie to somebody, or the willingness, or the ability.
Right. So most of the things that set us apart are negative attributes.
Exactly, negative attributes. The idea that these are the things that make us human. Well, what's the famous quote? "The air is the human," right? So what makes you human is the fact that we screw up, which that doesn't instill a whole lot of confidence in the race of our people. But yeah, the idea that these are the things that identify that these robots can identify. That it's not about telling the truth, because apparently everyone tells the truth. That's the baseline. It's the ability to deviate from that, to do something on the other side. That's what humans do. To transgress is what humans do.
It's funny to me how much stock they put into the fact that robots don't tell lies. When we see throughout the series that if they don't necessarily lie, they still sort of
obfuscate. Yeah.
Yeah, like Euron, when she's going to meet the guy under the bridge. Yeah. I think there's some panels where Astro or Adam is like, what are you going to do? And she's like, oh, I'm just, going, there's something I'm here. It's calling me or whatever. And it's like, okay. Or
it's
even
not wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. Or even Adam, just the fact that he's like, I'm going to get it. I got to go to the bathroom or whatever. It's like, you don't have to do that. Actually, you're just kind of playing pretend. The robots may not necessarily lie, but they don't purely tell the truth either.
Yeah. There's a lot of deflection going on in them that they to get around that programming. Yes. But that could also maybe be a product of the fact that those are the more advanced ones. Maybe talk to the older models or whatnot. But yeah, that there is something to that maybe we're supposed to pick up on. That the more advanced robots can kind of skirt around some of these things that everyone believes to be true about about robots. Again, it goes back to that idea of the 3 laws of robotics. The thing I think I brought up early on, the Isaac Asimov, the rules that govern robots that everyone knows are true until they're not. Everyone knows robots can only do these things, robots only act a certain way, but the tipping point is when we start getting a few of them that don't. And obviously these 7 exceptional ones are just that. They're the ones that maybe can't quite play by or don't have to play by the rules, and that's what's throwing a wrench in or seem to appear to be throwing a wrench in the ecosystem they have between humans and AI.
Hey, I'm already seeing the robots go awry in our own world. My wife works at one of the universities here, and they have those delivery robots that drive around campus. Yeah. I've already seen them almost trip 3 or 4 kids. They're just those things are wheeling. They're out for blood. So
okay, but now here's an interesting pro and con. So my sister lives in San Francisco, and they have AI driven cars that interact on the street. And if you want to know the difference between AI and humanity, according to this book and reality, people figured out that the AI car will always yield to you. So they would get stuck at stop signs for an hour because people would see there's no driver and be like, oh, I can just abuse this. I can just go. Yeah. And the AI will just always yield. And I'm like, this is 100% the point that the book is making. The worst attributes are what make us human.
Yeah.
It's the fact that it's behaving like we all should, and because of that, we're going to exploit it.
If you're too good for this world, all you'll do is get walked over.
Right.
So maybe Urasawa's right. Maybe we're not that great. Maybe humanity as a whole isn't all that redeemable.
Yeah, he may have written this while riding in the back of an Uber that was driven by an AI. It's stuck at a stop sign is humanity's the worst.
Yeah.
Well, you can see it a little bit at that part where Gazit is kind of like confronting like the giant robot, and all the humans are yelling at him to like kill it, but he has some kind of pity for it. He's like, no, it like I shouldn't do that, right? Like,
well,
that's not right. Whereas all the humans are like, just get rid of it.
He's recognizing that like it's not Pluto's fault here. Pluto's being controlled. You know, he understands that this creature, this being, is being used. And so that is showing empathy, and which is a trait that is often by some factors of humanity seen as a weakness, right? Empathy, compassion, those things are too often downgraded as human qualities, as emotions, when the whole idea apparently is to act and be decisive. And that's what, all the cops, all the SWAT team, whatever they send there, it's all just like take him out, kill. And you can see it's like, no, the idea of pity and compassion and deep empathy, and just understanding that whatever he's looking at beneath that barricade, like, is not at fault here. And to know that, and to walk away, knowing what that would mean for him on a professional level, I guess, which didn't matter to him at that point because he already tried. He had just tried to quit, a few seconds before that. So clearly he wasn't worried about that anymore. But yeah, that is, and it's funny though, because when we talk about things like that, what is, if that were, let's say, take the robot out of it, take the AI out of it, what would we say as observers that Gazit did? Oh, he showed some humanity. When anytime anyone shows kindness or compassion, it's the humane thing to do. They're showing their humanity. Their humanity is coming out. So in that way, only in those cases, sometimes it's being elevated, and then that's what it means to be human. The ability to show that kind of kindness. And yet in the book here, it's being spun as the things that make us human are those negative things. And yet, so the rest of the humans can't see that what Gazit did was make a humane choice. He did the thing that makes us as human as screwing up, as lashing out, as becoming angry and letting our emotions take over. Because I think in that moment he did let his emotions take over in the positive way. He let that compassion control his actions and kind of focus his mind versus just pure rage and aggression, which again is as human as both those are as human as possible. They're both human reactions. Just that the way they're being highlighted in the book, the way that Urasawa seems to be that he's trying to direct our attention, in that the way humanity is right now, maybe in this world, he's trying to show is that negative side. And then what could potentially save it is what's going to, I think, come in the end, which is that other side, that other polarity. What's the other extreme from hatred and anger? So no, that is that. I really enjoyed that. I'm glad you pointed that out. That was a great moment there.
Yeah, I mean, so many little scenes, and I think that's what really makes this. I actually kind of gloss over a lot of the fight scenes and action in this. But anytime it's two characters having a cup of coffee, especially characters who don't need to drink coffee, I think that's where a lot of the magic and goodness is. And then you have recurring names that pop up just to continually build intrigue. So you never go more than a few chapters without hearing the name Goji or Bora. Someone acting terrified and saying Bora, or the 500 Zeus. A peace guy,
all these callbacks,
right, all these callbacks, and it's just you always get the sense that even though I've started to figure out a little bit of the mystery, there's all this stuff brewing, and I just have to keep. It just makes you binge and press on. So I don't remember if this came out monthly originally, right?
I believe so. Yeah,
it would have been slow drip torture for me. I would have absolutely died waiting for this monthly.
Those are chapters monthly, right?
Yes, chapters monthly.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's 65
five and a half years, something like that.
Yeah. And I mean, they, at the same time, Western comics come out monthly, but again, we're talking about how much are you getting? You know, how many pages would have gone? How many pages are in a chapter about?
I think it's about, well, this is like 20 to 25-ish, I think.
So I mean that's
So yeah,
that's right on line with Western comics, 22 pages, something like that, 24 if you're lucky. You know, so every month for 5.5 years. I mean, that's interesting to think about too, in terms of the comparison between these kind of East and West storytellings, is that if you were reading this, you're getting it just like you would if you got Batman for 65 issues, you know, or
Right.
Spider-Man, you know, every month you're getting another 20 some odd pages. And then, yeah, you gotta hang on and wait. And to tell a story like that over 5+ years, yeah, you know, that's curious that it came out that way. That's interesting that there is even another kind of connection to, or a more similar storytelling aspect and understanding to kind of what we see in Western comics.
well, this is actually it's a pretty light page count for a monthly manga.
Mm-hmm.
Like most weekly manga are somewhere around 19 to 20, 21 pages,
Which is, again,
weekly.
Just shy of a monthly comic release. Yeah.
Yeah, but a monthly one, typically something like Boruto or like Dragon Ball Super, those have somewhere between like 45 to 50-ish usually.
So like twice
this is
as
actually
much.
this is actually like fairly light for a monthly manga.
Keeping wanting more, you know.
Yeah.
You feel, you know, I can see how you would pick that up and feel like you weren't getting enough, and at the same time still craving more, you know. You feel like, I'm only getting 20 some odd pages, and yet you're not angry because what you got in those 20 some odd pages was pretty damn good.
Yeah.
You know,
well,
you want to stick with it.
It also makes it much more digestible to read, like we are now after it's been completed. You know, going back to catch up to something like Dragon Ball Super can kind of be a grind because you got,
there's like 45 volumes.
It's been going for a while. So you've got, 70 Dragon Ball Super chapters are all 45 to 50 pages.
Yeah.
It kind of wears you down after a while.
Well, it's the same thing that Mike and I talk about. Is why we don't look like, it's like we're not. We may talk about a Batman or a Spider-Man miniseries at some time, but you know what we're not going to do? We're not going to cover Amazing Spider-Man, which is up to like 800, almost 900 some odd issues. Like we're not doing that. You know, we're not doing, because it doesn't make any sense. And it's just, where do you start? There's so much to get through, and it's still ongoing. So yeah, it having a contained series like this, that again, I have to agree with you, Cole, there, that it feels like he had to have had this arc planned out. He had to know, and whether the specifics or not, how much he knew at the beginning, but he had to know, like, volume 1's going to end about here on this thing, on this reveal. Volume 2 ends on this reveal, and just to know what the major beats were and then fill in as he goes. So he knows he has the roadmap there, but maybe he takes a side card here, that, a side path here and gets his way back. But to have that roadmap before he started, it feels that way. Oh, and if not, and if he's writing this as he's going, then he might be one of the greatest storytellers on the planet to figure out and make all this stuff work, if he's doing it as he's going and didn't at least have some, series Bible outline. If he didn't have something like that to start with, and again, I guess he has the original story to have some sort of like, well, here are some of the major points I know I want to hit, and then here's where I want to expand. Here's where I want to fill in. So I'm sure that was helpful too for him.
Well, even comparing it to Monster, which is, as well done as it is, there are still parts of that where you can see it's like, okay, he was just sort of like, all right, I need something for this week, or like, let's pad out a couple chapters. You can definitely tell that it's like, it was a more harsh schedule and probably less planned out than this one is. I get the sense reading this compared to that. I mean, Monster was an earlier work, so it could just be that he improved, right? Yeah. But I suspect that this one was a little more planned out, and
and the idea that you said he's more established now. So again, it's the idea of like any sort of writer or a showrunner on television. You do a couple early series, and then when you're given like your big shot, that you get a little more leeway. You get a little more room for the network. The publisher will let you go, and because they have faith, they've seen your earlier stuff. So now that you have a name for yourself, you you couldn't have done this, or it's a lot harder to do something like this right off the jump. You got to put your dues in a little bit, get your reps in, and then you're allowed to tell, your magnum opus, whatever you want to call it. It's rare that anyone gets to do that from the jump.
I have gone through I took like screenshots as I was going through my favorite pages, and I have finished all of mine. And I think in terms of like macro themes, we touched on everything I wanted to hit for these ones because I want to save some for 7, 8.
Sure.
But you guys have any other thoughts to wrap up 5 and 6?
I think my last note is just I love how they make all of the kind of the protagonist characters such charming characters. Like he really does a great job with kind of fleshing out some of these robots, like Gazit, like Adam, Uran, the scientist, like any kind of quote unquote good guy character. I think it's just could be someone's favorite character. But that makes sense. I think it's just he's done a really good job. There's really none of those characters that I'm like, they appear on the screen. It's like, this is kind of it's kind of a drag, right?
Killer,
like Adam's back, or like Uran's here.
The amount of character work. And I think what's testament to that is that like Uran only has like the one chapter where we see her just go and help a bunch of people there. When she's not there, you're not missing her because because you don't connect with the story, but because you're invested in the character you are seeing. And then when you jump back to when we came to her, it was like, oh right, what's her dealing with? What's the fallout from Adam's death? And you're not thinking, well, what's Gazit doing? Because that comes in the middle of the Gazit Adolf thing, I think, right? Or I'm trying to remember now, but yeah, you don't feel like you're being taken away from any other story. You're just being brought into another one that like you forgot about because you were so into the other characters that he was doing. I think that's not easy to do because you're right. There's always going to be one character is always going to be someone's favorite. And when you're not telling the character about the story about that character, you could feel like maybe you lose that audience. Like, I don't see Gazit here. I'm gonna speed through this one here. But you feel drawn to all those characters.
Well, I think, to go back, 5 volumes, I think North Number 2 was one of those characters, right? Yes, you only get 3 chapters with North Number 2, but like
by the time you're done there,
he's one of the top, 2 or 3 like best characters in this manga, and the rest of after he's gone, you're not like, oh well, what am I doing with this now? Like I don't want to read this anymore. North Number 2's gone, but like because everyone else is done just as well.
And I think that's the first time we do that. He does in the story where we're following Gazit all the way through, and then there's this hard left turn, and it works. You get those 3 volumes there, and it works, and then he's gone, and that's it. And we don't come back to it. Except maybe for some of the investigation there. But it's like proof of concept for the rest of the story that like we can jump here, we can do this, we can make you care about this character and have it only tangentially relate to our big story. So as we go down further and we start doing it with other characters, we know we can jump back and forth. We know we can leave Gazit, our quote unquote main character, our capital M, capital C main character, and we can go to these other parts there, and we're not going to lose the readers because he's skilled enough, Urasawa is skilled enough to get you invested in these other characters, whether they recur or like North Number 2, they're just kind of a one-off for 3 chapters and that's it. He knows he can get you in there, and you're not going to feel cheated that you're not getting a story with Gazit along the main storyline. But when we jump away from that, you're not going to feel like you're missing it, and you're not going to feel like the story you are getting is like filler. Like it is one of those like I need a few more weeks to work on the real story, so let's put out something quick just to meet publishing deadlines. Everything feels important, everything feels pertinent, everything feels relevant to whether it's the overall story or just the world that you're existing in. Nothing feels extraneous.
It's masterful storytelling. The other thing that I don't want to go ever really an episode without mentioning, but I do think the art is stunningly beautiful. Much more developed than I think any weekly art has the right to be. Just lots of detailing, beautiful shading.
And I think that's maybe why it was monthly and only 22 issues.
Right.
There's a lot of extra work going into it.
Right. It's just in a genre like above and beyond, which, obviously the publication timeline is a huge factor in that many manga artists would be capable of, really
given
intricate,
given the time and
given
space,
the time frame. Yeah. But it's just one of those things where I was reading some other manga this week, and not to be rude to anyone, but it feels like you fell off a cliff compared to reading Pluto. I feel that way about like certain eras of like Western comic art too. And it was and Alex and I learned on a podcast interview we did not that long ago that we're talking to a colorist, and he was talking about when he got started, the printing technology in the 90s was very different, and you had to like conform to very confined color palettes, which is why all old comics feel like old comics. And now with modern printers, you can have depth and shading and modeling and all this other stuff.
The paper is different, the material is different as well.
And it just simply wasn't an option at the time. So it's not fair to judge artists by the constraints of their medium or timeline, which I'm not trying to do. I'm just trying to celebrate when it gets done really well. Like when somebody was patient enough to let this come out monthly, and the creative team just knew what they were about and just hit it out of the park every single month.
Given that space and time. Although I will say, even though the color palette was limited for some of those 90s comics coming out in the US and all that stuff, some of that art's still pretty bad. Just like it's just bad. It's also just bad line art. Some of it's too. The errors are different, but some of it's just pretty bad.
No, I wasn't looking to throw anyone under the bus. I was just trying to say there are artists I respect who did.
I have a handful of artists that I would gladly throw under the bus if we went down that rabbit hole there.
We had a guest who did that for us already.
I think there's something to be said about the idea of time and space, right? The idea of the ability that maybe they gave Urasawa, that it is only 22 pages, that it is come out monthly, that he was allowed to indulge, maybe that's the right word, to really put it in everything he can into these pages, into these panels, and not feel like hopefully not feel like he was being rushed, that he was under the gun of a deadline, that he's able to do the things he wanted to do visually to tell the story that he clearly had in his head.
Right. I mean, there are like panels where like for the whole thing here, Gazeek's suit has like a crosshatch pattern to it, which would take a really fine tip to do. And then, it will cut to some landscape shot where you see the sky and they're big like watercolory blotches. And it's like, this is a lot for just doing ink, like no colors. You're conveying a lot of texture, a lot of depth of field, just masterfully done art. Yeah. So I don't need to bash anyone in order to get to the positive here. Although it's nice to know that we have that in the tank if we ever decide to go that direction.
If we need to go that route, I got a list in my head of people I can chuck under the bus.
All right.
Well, I'll throw out two. I'll throw out too that Urasawa actually has a YouTube channel where he does sort of like, not necessarily like tutorials, but he'll give like drawing tips and stuff, and they're all English subtitled, and they're pretty cool, and I think worth kind of checking out. You can definitely tell like he's pretty good at what he does. Yeah,
nice.
Like there's someone here that's like how to. There's one that has Gazette, and it's like how to color by hand and things like that. So it's definitely worth checking out a little bit too, just kind of like see his process also.
Oh, that's cool. That's
cool.
I've
watched some of like how Miyazaki, doing his drawing. He's not really instructing. You can just shadow him as he does it. Whereas like that, I'm never going to have that artistic ability. If Urasawa could teach me how to draw my signature consistently on iPads for like signing my credit card, that would be a monumental artistic achievement for me.
No, I stuff like that. I know there are plenty of Western artists. I know Jim Lee has his YouTube page where he does live streaming, and he said before that the reason he does the live stream, it's fun to interact, but also it's a way to guarantee that he gets the drawing done, whether it's a commission or a cover, because he's got all these roles at DC Comics, but he's also like notoriously slow, and so by live streaming his stuff, make sure he gets it done because people put him on track. But it's the idea of he'll maybe talk through what he's doing, but just watching someone work like that, and just watch them create and see how they see character and form and expression and all of that. Yeah, it's just it.
I think I know some,
whether it's a how-to or just watching someone live stream, just watching them draw and then go from the pencils to the ink and work all of that. You know, it is like magic at sometimes. So that's awesome. I'll check out Urasawa's page. That's really cool.
Yeah, I just pulled it up and bookmarked it for later. But I do know some.
We'll link to it. It'll be linked.
Yeah, we'll link it in the episode. That's smart.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Yeah, I was gonna say I know Game of Thrones fans who would love George R.R. Martin to have a live stream and just watch him type chapters of the last book that's never coming.
It's a blank word screen with just a blinking cursor. It's that for hours.
It would be 10,000 people watching,
just waiting for any movement.
And he'd be like, and you'd be watching George R.R. Martin Google Stephen King interviews where he talks about his writing method and how he cranks out stuff so quickly. So it'd be a real meta watching experience. Anyway, those are all my Pluto 5 and 6 thoughts. It looks like I'm getting a nod from Cole and from Alex. Yep. So with that, we will let you finish reading the entire series. And then very excitingly, we will drop our final episode a mere 2 days before the Netflix series starts. And I'm now back. I'm like in the habit where I watch that trailer like once a week now. Like I'm so giddy. Like every time I finish like reading another Pluto book, I'm just like look back and I'm like, oh yeah, like because the art at the beginning of each volume with the color just gives you like a little glimpse of like what this could be,
a little taste,
final form, sure. Anime, and the Netflix one looks even more beautiful than what I could have expected. And I'm not a big anime. I've read more manga than I've watched anime. I'm not a big anime watcher. So it's a relatively new medium for me, but I'm very excited for the Netflix. So anyway, 7 and 8, whatever chapters you haven't read, read those.
All the way to the end. Yep.
PlutoManga.com. And we will see you next Tuesday for 7 and 8.
Peace.